This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario.
Hello and welcome to Canada Reads American Style. This is Tara. I'm here with Rebecca, and just wait for it. This is our last day, our final wrap-up day for Canada Reads 2025, and so we also have a super special guest with us. We have the host of Canada Reads, Ali Hassan. Welcome, Ali.
Hi, Tara. Nice to be here. I think, are we going on 9 years? Did we ever skip a year? This is our, I mean, the problem is you guys, you say special guest, but people might be like, predictable. Predictable. We knew it would be him.
Never predictable. Never.
Exactly. Okay, well, I'm going to just kick off with the first question, which is a really basic overview, but what was your overall impression of this year's debates? Because spoiler alert, we loved it.
I hated it. Imagine completely a different direction. No, there was this sentiment, this prevailing sentiment in early in this year that Canada needs a hug. We're sitting here minding our own business and taking hits from various directions that we couldn't really have anticipated. Some people might have, but in general, we're like, well, what's going on? What's being levied against us? What are we being, sort of led into? And I think this year Canada Reads was exactly what we needed. It was thoughtful, kind, respectful debate about, very interesting, different experiences. The theme was to change the narrative, and the narrative is being changed publicly all the time. So we're in a changed narrative, and we're talking about changing the narrative. And we had some incredibly prepared and thoughtful guests talking about pretty serious themes, but doing it in a very interesting way. And I thought it was just the perfect Canada Reads. There might be other years where we're a little bit more sort of feisty and spicy. I don't think this was the time for that. And I feel like our panelists understood that and approached this year in the spirit that was really exactly what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, and we always say we just want a really good book discussion, and we feel like that's exactly what we got. Yeah.
So on that note, Ali, let's talk about the defenders, because we have questions ourselves and then also one of our listeners. So hello, Sherry from Nova Scotia, wanted to know a little bit more about how the defenders are chosen. So were they chosen so that you knew you would get this kind of vibe going into it?
No, not really, because they're chosen in the fall. And in the fall, okay. I mean, we were so young, we were naive. What did we know about what was going to happen in the world, So no, I don't think they're chosen with that in mind. The selection process is kind of a logistical nightmare. It's one that I have nothing to do with. So from my perspective, it's a nightmare. From the perspective of the people doing it, I think they welcome the challenge, but it is very, very challenging. So you're trying to, year by year, you're trying to represent voices across the country. So that would be different, people from different political ends of the political spectrum, different economic backgrounds or economic upbringing, socioeconomic, cultural, different voices in general. You don't want 5 people who have the exact same lived experience. That doesn't make for a good debate. Mm-hmm. But then there's also these things that you don't think about, besides the gender makeup. You also don't want 5 men at the table, or maybe 5 women. Might be exciting, but you want to make sure it's something that is a variety. The thing that I hadn't considered until I started doing Canada Reads is you also want actual different voices, like the actual sound of somebody's voice, because it's so popular on radio. You don't want to have a situation for 4 days where people are like, wait, who's talking? That person sounds exactly like that person. So it's just so many different things. And so you go year to year, you say, we need voices from this way. And then with all that in mind, there's the schedule of the people you're chasing. You know, we've had people sometimes for 3 years, they've been like, I definitely want to do the show. I love the show and I love literature. I'm not available in March, right? Some of the people we're chasing are chase worthy because of how interesting they are, because of how celebrated they are. But when you're interesting and celebrated, you're also quite busy typically, right? And what we, as a show, I say we, but you know, what the show asks of people is a, you're not going to be paid. You're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to be available for 2 days in January for the launch, and you're going to have to be available for about 5 to 6 days in March. And Shayla Stonechild, for example, was in the Mexican jungle in the forest for 4 days on an Indigenous retreat. 2 days off the retreat, and then right on into a studio. And she couldn't have been in a more different environment. She was in these lodges, being smudged and fasting, and so you just never know what's happening in somebody's life. And uh, yeah, there's the wish list, but I don't think you ever get who's on your wish list. So there's the secondary wish list, which then becomes sometimes better than what you were actually chasing. Um, and yeah, so this is what I mean. The logistics behind it are not clear and simple. But early in the fall, the Canada Reads team starts asking people, would you be available? Would you be? And some of them are like, I don't know yet. And
Hmm.
if by November they're still saying I don't know yet, then we just can't. You can't sort of
Move on.
operate with that. Yeah, you have to move on to somebody else who is available.
Now, are
And
you
yeah, so it's tough.
privy to the wish? You don't have to tell us if you know who's on this
I
wish list. Are
don't
you
at
privy? You
all.
don't? Okay.
No, I've known a few times over the years somebody says, "Oh, we're chasing this person," and let's say I've known 3 times. That name has never been the person on
Hmm.
Canada Read. So there's no value in me knowing that and starting to like envision a panel with that person on it. You
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just there's so many moving parts. There's so
Yeah.
many moving parts to getting these 5 people to that table in March, that what they want in September and what they hope for is not. And the wish list, by the way, I said the wish list is about 40 people any given year. Some of them people who couldn't do it the year before, and they're like, please keep me in mind, I love this. And some people completely new voices, and some people just like last minute suggestions, like, oh, we didn't think about that. That's a great suggestion that came from somebody else. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. One last defender question then. Do the defenders know the questions before you ask them?
They don't know the questions. They might in the more. We also don't want a situation where we ask something and they're like, that's out of nowhere. I didn't consider that. That's not in my notes. I'm not sure how to answer that. You don't want that. So definitely the Canada Reads team gives you a little bit of an idea. Like, we might discuss these type of themes. You might want to read the books with this in mind. A little bit of, just to have them sort of semi prepared so they're not completely winging it. Um, in the end, they are almost always very prepared. There are certainly some standouts. Some people are Olympic athletes and they bring that work ethic to the table, the insane preparation. Some people work best off the cuff because they just are that bright. I think of Matea Roach, who would have a paper in front of them and then give an answer, and then I'd glance at the paper. Paper was blank. It was just sometimes they were just writing stuff for the sake of writing, but it didn't, just to be like, oh, I guess everybody else is writing, I should probably write. But Matea is such an incredibly bright person that it didn't
Yeah.
matter. Linwood Barclay this year was the same. Um, just so much they're able to keep so much up here that they don't need to have that same. The preparation looks different from somebody
Hmm.
else's preparation, But yeah, the answer to the question is they don't know the exact questions. But those who do their research, this is what I wanted to add. Those who do their research will listen to 4 or 5 years of Canada Reads. That's part
Mm.
of their research, and so then you get an idea. Oh, they may ask about themes that are common to each of the books. So then they say, okay, so what are the themes that are common to each of these books? Oh, this year every single character goes on a journey, a literal or a metaphorical journey This year, people, hope is a huge thing. You have to have hope to get through something like this and this and this and all these books. So if they're astute and if they're trying to prepare, they will generally be ready for the questions, even if we don't tell them what they are, which
Okay.
we don't like to do that.
Okay, you've set me up for my next question too. Beautifully, you're setting me up for my next one,
Hmm.
Ali. So this one I'm going to get more specific though, because I think it was on day 3. You asked the panel a question about hope and which book the defenders least connected with.
Hmm.
They answered the questions, 4 of them did answer the question. And then when you got to Shayla, you switched it on her. You switched the question and
Yeah.
you changed it to ask her why her book or what her book has to say about resilience. Why did you do that?
Why did I do that? I think, it might have been more obvious for Shayla's book. It is such an incredible story of hope. This 80-year-old woman who has gone through the most awful, unspeakable things and has come out of it, an author who's at that time being showcased on Canada Reads. I mean, hope is central to
Mm,
what Shayla's book, the book she was defending, is all about. I think by having her talk about it, it's almost too much of a favor to Shayla. It almost puts her in a place where she's like, "Oh, hope. Well, now
yeah.
I'm going to blow everybody out of the water because this is hope incarnate over here. This is hope embodied, in a book." And I think that's what I was thinking, where I was like, let me switch gears for Shayla to talk about something else that might not be as obvious to her.
Hmm.
And it did not throw her off at all,
No.
given her level of preparedness, obviously. And my goal isn't to throw people off, but just to give everybody a chance to showcase what's in their book. And I think, if I remember what I was thinking at the time, it was that. I'm like, for
Okay.
Shayla, hope might be a little bit too on the nose here. This is all about hope and resilience, and but let's try to do something else. Maybe resilience will be a little bit fresher of a take, not as obvious.
Perfect.
So when you're sitting there listening to everyone, what is your brain doing? I mean, are you really able to focus on what they're saying? But I know you have to be thinking about all the external things as well. So how in the world are you
Yeah.
processing all that?
After 9 years, it's getting a little easier, but definitely, my brain was doing cartwheels for the first few years of Canada Reads, just trying to keep everything. And we learn as a team what works and what doesn't. And I've asked for less talking in my ear,
Oh,
and more somebody just tell me, hey, take a look at your screen, so that I can take my time to read what's on the screen rather than have somebody tell me detailed things in my ears. Because when I am deep into listening to a conversation and thinking about, oh, if this person is talking about this subject, I know that one of the other panelists has something to say about that subject too. So after this person, I can go to them, and it would be a nice link. But if somebody's in my ear, I can't listen to two things.
hmm.
And now I'm missing what's happening at the table. So I only realize that over time, that I am so, invested in what's happening in front of me. It's probably, the most engaged I am all year round. My wife could be telling me about any number of things that relate to the family that I love, and I'm not as engaged as I am in that table in that moment. Just out of service to all the people who are listening to the show and love the show, I really get dialed in. So yeah, we've streamlined it a little bit, and now I'm in a place where I'm better able to
Mm.
listen, and um, somebody will just say in my ear screen, and I'll glance over and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to look at that a little bit later. Okay, I'll take a look at it now because I understand what's happening here. So we've sort of, found a way to make it work. But certainly there is a lot between the clock and the screen and in the ear and on the teleprompter and what's happening. But it gets easier over time. It's not as difficult as it used to be.
Yeah, and maybe we owe you a lot more credit
not that we don't give you credit, but we owe you more credit for having such a great year this year because everything was seamless and everything just worked so beautifully. So
Thank you.
kudos to
I
you as
appreciate it.
well,
Yeah,
of course.
if people are talking about me and things I've done, then probably I've blown it. It should be. That's kind of the role of a moderator. I think you shouldn't be remembering things the moderator did because the moderator let something happen smoothly and organically. If there's too much talk about Ali Hassan after Canada Read, something has maybe gone wrong. Probably I screwed something up. Yeah, so that's good.
Right. Well, we have a question from our friend of the podcast, our listener Zerelda, who lives in Louisiana. Actually, she's Cajun. And she wanted to know if CBC might ever consider an all-star debate with past winning defenders, which we would love to see.
We would love it too, I'm sure. I mean, it comes up. It comes up often. Like, wouldn't that be incredible for like the 25th year anniversary or whatever? It's just so difficult schedule wise, right? A lot of the people who are on Canada Reads were sort of just coming up in their career, and we were able to get them before things got too busy for them. Not everyone, but there are certain people who sort of now in retirement, but just the scheduling of that seems like it would be difficult. Also, it's this balance of like, yeah, let's bring some people back. However, every year you're like, there's so many other voices we'd love to hear from and haven't heard from. So it's like, do we bring similar voices back? But I think it is sort of a fantasy on the team, and if they could ever make it work, they would. I would say that they're not averse to it, but logistically, could it be planned? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So, Ali, you wrote this fabulous book called Is There Bacon in Heaven? And I wanted to hold it up so Ali could see I own a copy, although I forgot to get it signed, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, are you planning on writing any more books?
I write a little bit every week. I put stuff into sort of notes and I've got, what I'm looking at right now, and as I think about what it could become, it's in the spirit of one of my favorite writers. That's David Sedaris. It's comedic essays. And I do like, it's just starting to take shape. It's not anywhere. First of all, it'll never be what David does, but it's not even a tribute to David yet. But I see it like possibly becoming that. And I think what I really need to do, and this is what I've been thinking about for this summer that's coming up, is doing a thing where I'm, 4 to 6 hours a day and really investing all the time that I can, turning it into something I'm more proud of, that I can then go to the publisher and be like, I think I might be onto something. And then they'll be like, no, you're not. And then we can work together on turning it into something that is, eventually publishable and readable by the public. But I would love to, and I just need to get a little bit more focused on it. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm happy, really, really happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ali, another favorite question we love to ask. What are you currently reading? Or, because you've just gotten off a week of Canada Read, so maybe you didn't get much reading time in, what recommendations do you have for us?
Yeah, was great you asked that. I just went to a talk. Omar El Akkad, you've been listening to the show for long enough, and one of the most I don't even have the adjectives. It was jarring and eye-opening and bewildering that somebody could write this, and I still see that book as just sort of playing out in my mind. The fact that it hasn't become a movie, it also baffles me, but it was American War, and that was my introduction to Omar Al Akkad. Since then, he also wrote What Strange Paradise, which was also on Canada Read. So he's been on twice. And that first book just blew my mind. It haunted me. It haunted me for weeks and weeks, months afterwards. And so he's written another book, which is called One Day, Everyone Will Always Have Been Against This. And he was in he's doing a tour, and he was in conversation with Elamin Abdul Mahmoud, who's also a CBC host of a show called Commotion. And you want to talk about the big hug that everybody needed. It was a beautiful, beautiful event. Sold out immediately. They did it a second time, sponsored by the Toronto Palestinian Film Association or Film Festival, I think, and another story bookstore here in Toronto. And it was just such a great event. And I have not read one word of it because of, as you say, Canada Reads, and it was just the week before Canada Reads. But I'm quote unquote looking forward to it. I mean, the subject matter is obviously very heavy, but I am looking forward to reading anything Omar does, especially in light of that 1 hour talk that he had and the various things he was discussing. I love that guy. This beautiful, beautiful man. Also one of the funniest guys I've ever met, which you wouldn't know unless you really sort of pick away at him and scratch the surface. He's what's called low key funny. But that's a book I'm about to read. And then as far as books that I really liked, and it'll be trouble if this book is on Canada Reads, because I'm able to put it all, like whoever wins. But this book, I mean, this was the book, like if somebody goes, what would you champion on Canada Read? This is like, it's a Janika Oza debut novel, which is, she doesn't write like a debut author. It's very good. It's called The History of Burning. And I just, it spoke to me in such a profound way. There's so many friends I have who have come to Canada and the US, India, the various African countries, South Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Indian immigrants who first stopped in Africa, and then Africa became their home the same way Canada has become my home, or who came via Trinidad or Guyana or the broader West Indies. And this is their stories. It's their stories. And you want to talk about stories of like immigration and also of like trauma and intergenerational trauma. It goes, I think it's 4 generations spanning 3 different continents. It's really like an epic story. And I was just on the edge of my seat for it. And I loved it. And I don't usually get a starstruck or weird around people. I'm very much a person who is like, yeah, that might be a celebrity, but they're also a human being, and they're a human being. So you can talk to people like human beings. And I've always found that you have a better conversation with somebody when you're not sort of fawning over them. And it's not in my nature to do that. But I met Janika Oza at a writers festival, Kingston Writers Festival. Now, unfortunately, is folded. But I met her and I was like, "You're Janika Oza," and she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "No, your book. It's I loved your book." And she's like, "Okay, anyway, see you later." I was like, "No, I went too much. But this is how much the book had an effect on me, that I was like, I have so much to say to you. And she was literally, I was coming into the festival and she was actually leaving, but I think I precipitated her departure a little faster the way I approached her. But yeah, those are 2 books just sort of sitting on the desk right now. As you asked me that question, they're the exact right books to be sitting here.
You answered my next question, which was, if you could defend a book, what would it be and why? So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot to say about this book, and it taps into so many different conversations that I've organically had with friends since my teens and my 20s, and just meeting brown people who are just like me in so many ways. And I go, so where are you from? In India, Pakistan? They go, no, I'm Kenyan. My family is from Nairobi. I'm like, what? But how? And so that leads to, then you meet somebody who's like, they have more of a connection to Tanzania than they do to India, even though they are exactly, same experience, brown. And so you learn so much about immigration and about indentured laborers and slavery and things by meeting the people who are connected to this. And then, this idea of like colonialism, divide and conquer, was something that was being perfected in Africa. So you'd let these brown immigrants, indentured laborers, people who had come over to this work, you'd let them sort of get bank loans or give them access to certain things, and you wouldn't to Black Africans. and what that created between them. And then the British were able to just, not just the British, but all these colonial powers were able to be like, yeah, let them fight against themselves. Their focus is off of us. And then you see that, you know, in places like Los Angeles, for example, you have these Korean immigrants who are able to get a loan quickly and set up a corner store, whereas people were like, this is my community. My parents were born here. My grandparents were like, we've been here for few hundred years and I'm not able to get anything from a bank, even though I have. And again, it's another version of divide and conquer. So this book has themes that affect all of us, you know. I would have to pause reading just because I would find my mind drifting, not because the writing wasn't compelling, but just because it just set me off thinking about so many other things. So it just the implications of a book and what it makes you think of and what the themes lead, what other themes the themes lead to. Really great. I could talk about it at length, and I think that's what you want in a book. If you're defending it, you want to be able to have it lead to many conversations and ideas.
Yeah, that would be a perfect book. Okay, so every year now for the long list, I'm going to look for that book. If it ever makes the short list, I'm going to be thinking of you the whole time.
Yeah.
Whole time.
Yeah, exactly. I've revealed too much. I'll have to ask you, if it ever makes it to Canada Reads, I'll have to reach out to you and say, hey, can we edit out that check?
Exactly. Ali, as always, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a great wrap up to the season. And I just hope that you'll be on there for the next 9 years or however long I live. I want you to be the host of the show.
Much. Thank you. That's very, very kind. I appreciate you being fans. I appreciate you spreading the word and you know, building this enthusiastic community about this show. And I'm always going to be available to you.
Aww.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali.
Okay.
Happy reading, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.